All right. Thank you very much for attending episode 38 of Worldwide Slot Car Chat. I'm your host, Greg Gaub. We've got we've got a heck of a group already here, and I'm letting in Martin John. We've got RK, Petrucci, John Kitt, Paul, Jeremy, Leo, Garth, and a couple of new faces. Big Dan, Big Dan, if that's the name you're going by, I have not seen before, and I saw a Wayne. I don't think has been on our chat. I think he was on the 143rd chat. But since we have a couple of new faces, I will offer up some time to them to talk about your slot car related history. Big Den, do you want to go ahead and give us a little bit of history about Big Den?
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever it happens to be where you are. I'm calling from Launceston in Tasmania, the little island south of Australia. This is my first time on, so your luck's run out. I started off like most of you around the early 60s on the Scale XT track. And then from about 64 to maybe 10 years ago, I was almost exclusively 24th scale at a mixture of commercial raceways and, club tracks when they were, it was on and off as, for that, I guess, 40-year period. And about the last 10 to 12 years, I've been pretty much 32nd scale. Most of my racing's been done at a track about 200 kilometres, 130 miles from where I live, and in a bit of a in a holiday hiatus at the moment. But anyway, for my first session, I'll stick around and do a lot of listening and let you guys get on with the talking. My real name is Dennis Murray, but I go by Big Den so I don't get confused with the other Dennis that comes on regularly. Okay, thank you very much.
If it works for you, it works for me, Big Den. We'll stick with Big Den to differentiate between Den and Dennis. And I don't think Wayne has been on this chat before. Do you want to tell us a little something about yourself, Mr. Linder?
Hello, everyone. My name's Wayne. Martin John down there knows me. We've met among our past. My history is very similar to a lot of yours. I'm a little bit younger. I began in the early 70s. Scalextric Triang, I believe we had. It was secondhand. I believe we had a Scalextric Set 60 and a U-Steer YS 200, and those two boxes were combined in our house. We moved house in 77 when I was 7 years old, and I can remember the Scalextric set being set up in the old house, as myself and my brother refer to it. He couldn't come along tonight, but I'm hoping to get him along with us next week. We got the Scalextric out every Christmas time for about 10 years from the mid 70s. And every Christmas, Father Christmas would bring two new cars, one for myself, one for my brother. And they'd be out for a week to a fortnight, and then it would all go away again until the next Christmas came around. By the late 1980s, I got a real road car. My brother had already got an RC racing car. And at that point, we started to take that RC car to a race meeting. Hence, we spent the next 20 years or more, in Stephen's case anyway, racing RC racing cars. We've had two comebacks to slot car racing. We had our first comeback in 2003, probably 2002. And we've had a very slow comeback to slot car racing since about 2016. We stopped again in 2008, I should say. And then it went away while I've had a child. Stephen's had a marriage. And we are playing again, and we've been playing again for about 3 or 4 years. We're not mad home set racers. We haven't got a layout or a home track. If we race, we tend to go to a club to do it. The background in RC car racing has given us a big step up with regard to the right way to do with a slot car. Sorry? Somebody spoke.
I
Thought
think
they were
that's
speaking to me. And that's it. I'll go into further detail into the 2002 comeback to slot car racing and the subsequent 2016 one. Hopefully, when I can get my brother on, just to check that what I'm telling her is right, because I'll probably remember it differently, and I don't want to spoil it for when he does his slot history. So yeah, needless to say, we've both got a very similar slot history because we both did the same things at the same time. I'm hoping to get him along next week. He's currently at work. He works in the medical industry. He tests bloods. And as you know, the UK is back in full lockdown and really, really, really busy doing all that kind of thing at the moment. So yeah, I've watched most of the YouTube content from the Worldwide Slot Car Chat. Didn't learn about it until about 3 weeks ago. Watched most of the content over Christmas, so I know most of you more than you know me. Don't be afraid if that comes to light. I do like to talk, so if you need to stop me at some point, don't be afraid to do that. And with that, I'll free up the mic and let the show continue.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Wayne, and look forward to meeting your brother and hearing the rest of the story between the both of you. I expect it to be especially amusing and entertaining, so practice.
Well, I may be able to produce some photography of it, or at least some content that we can use it on as a show tell history.
Even better. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, thank you, Mr. Segway. Does anybody have any show and tell? I don't have any. Martin, what you got? You're still muted. Oh, he's got to go.
How's that?
Now we can hear you.
I just found some artwork from an event at the now defunct Hereford Club. I just want to show you guys.
Yeah.
Right next to where I'm sitting.
Looking for boxers.
I showed you some paintings previously from one of the club members, Lawrence, and he did this just for a race back in, was it 2015? I can't remember. But yeah, Lawrence just threw this up in 2 minutes flat, you know. I mean, we got some good artists about, so I was really thrilled to find this the other day. When the Hereford Club folded, they were going to throw it out, so I thought, no way, I'm going to keep that.
Yeah.
It's just a lovely bit of slot car history for me.
That's beautiful.
So that's me, Greg.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Definitely need to get a good photograph of that and put it up somewhere so that other people can appreciate it. Does anybody else have anything they want to show and tell? New car?
I do.
All right, Chris, show it.
This is, I'm sure some of you are aware, I've got an awful lot of old vintage kits. So this one, I will start off, I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. This is a kit from 1966. It is a vintage Amt Lola T70 that has been fairly well redone. Is that up yet?
Gold and white.
Yeah. So this kit was, I've had this kit sitting on the shelf for, God, I have no long idea how long it's been on there. And, you know, I guess one of the hidden blessings in the whole COVID thing has been, you know, I've had time to actually root around and find out what I've got to build. So anyway, when I opened this up, it was missing a lot of bits. So I did have to do the intake trumpets and a new roll bar and driver's head and screens and bits and pieces and stuff like that. So I will show you a couple of pictures if you don't
do you have a question about this car specifically?
I did. I'm sorry, Chris. I had to step away. Which kit was this?
It's Amt Lola T70 from 1966.
Okay.
1/24 scale.
Yeah.
I got a couple more if you don't mind.
Chris, I don't think they looked like that back in the 60s. I'm just saying.
Well, probably not.
Not unless Chris was building them.
That's true. Yeah. For most of us, I think there would be a big thumbprint of glue on a part of it somewhere.
Yeah, is that up?
Yep.
For anyone, this is sort of a silly thing. I'm going to talk about the wheels. The wheels are not stock, and they're absolutely stunning wheels. But if anybody is, interested in building somewhat scale-looking models, I found this stuff quite a while ago that's used by the model train guys. It's called Blacken It. And it takes metal and makes it look black and used. So I don't know how well you can see the exhaust pipes on these things.
Yeah.
On
They
this,
look like
this
real exhaust
car.
pipes.
But they're pieces of brass tubing just put into this Blacken It stuff. So it sort of gives that rusty gray sort of, look to it, which is probably a little more authentic to what the car should be. A couple more, sorry.
Sorry to
Sorry,
interrupt.
Chris, what was the name? Oh, go ahead,
Sorry?
John.
What was the name of the black and stuff? I've heard of brass black, which obviously
No,
is
it's called very simply Blacken It. BLACKN or BLACKEN-IT. And you can find it online. It's the model guys who do tanks and model airplanes that want a really weathered looking metal use this stuff a lot. And I found it at my local hobby shop. So,
So Chris, sorry to interrupt. Is it only for metal, or can you use it on plastic as well? Is it like a
no, it's just for metal.
Oh,
The guys use it on when you buy tank treads, and they've got like white metal tank treads and stuff. The longer you soak this stuff, the darker it gets. So you can go from lightly to, not so much lightly and all the rest of the stuff. So this, unfortunately, is a really crummy picture. But a better picture, actually, the gauges actually look like gauges on this, which I was quite pleased with myself. But anyway, the picture doesn't really show it. And these little ferrules are just uninsulated ferrules you buy online. You can get them in all different sizes, and they are certainly a lot cooler than trying to paint up bits of plastic that look sensible. So
Chris, did you paint the dials on the dashboard?
Well, the dials were all chrome, and then I used this stuff that I sort of emailed or posted you about, this stuff called Tamiya panel line ink.
Yeah.
So I just put the gauges so they were the whole gauge panel so it was flat, and then dripped in a little of this Tamiya panel line ink, and it went to the low spot, so it sort of stayed off the little gate, the little indicators on the gauges that were chrome, and they look really funky. And then I just put a little drop of epoxy to make a lens in at the whole end of the day. So
so the next step for you is eyeballs then?
No, I'm not doing that. You can see very clearly here, zero eyeballs. I cannot do eyeballs. But these wheels, these are Rusket single piece cast aluminum wheels. It doesn't really show it from the picture, but all of these are open straight the way through, so they're individual spokes.
So those are Rusket, not Ulrich?
No, these are Rusket.
Wow.
Yeah, Rusket Lola T70 wheels. They're like some of the Cox wheels. They're absolutely stunning. They're all cast aluminum. They're gorgeous. I just sort of polished up the rims a little bit, but compared to an insert, I mean, they're hollow, so they're cast, and they're just gorgeous.
How are they attached? Are they attached with a nut or a set screw?
The fronts, bizarrely, I don't know why they did this, but this is the way they did it. The front wheels are certainly quite narrow. But you'll see it on the next picture. The front wheels are narrow, and they made those typically, as was in the day, these are a 540 threaded axle. The rears, bizarrely enough, are a 1/8 inch set screw rear axle. So, and when you bought the set of them, 4, you get 2 set screw and 2 540 threaded axle ones, which is a bit, you know. Anyway, I mean, it's cool to see. I got the one last picture. This is. That's the redone chassis.
Now whose tires are those, Chris? Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Chris, you're muted. Must have accidentally hit the mute button.
Oh dear. That's a shiny chassis though.
It looks awesome.
Yeah.
It's a work
wow.
of art.
You might
Oh,
not
look,
be Chris. Chris, if you're still talking, you're muted. I can't.
He even marked the polarity of the motor. Do you see that?
Am I unmuted now?
Now you're on.
There we
Yeah,
go.
sorry,
Yeah,
we were just
now we can
making
hear you.
comments. I hope you heard it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I did, and I'm not going to comment on them. But this is basically a stock AMT chassis, and there's a few things that on the original chassis, this axle tube is not there, so you've just got these 2 uprights. This rear brace that goes along, bends down, and then bends again down the uprights is not there. I put on these little brass tubes just so that I could route the lead wires, and it looks a bit funky. So basically you put on this, I put some piano wire rails all the way down the chassis, because these were the areas that these chassis ended up back in the day bending on. So done up the way it is, the motor is a little monster. Well, it's a big monster. It's a huge bloody thing. It's a 36D. But the car now it's a weapon. It's just a little scorcher.
So sorry, I asked you earlier, whose tires are those, Chris?
These on the front were in good shape. So these are the original AMTs. And the ones on the rear are original formulation gray Ortmans.
Have you run it yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. So it must go really, really well then.
Yeah. You know, the older stuff done up well. I don't have any, on my track anyway, I don't have any current 32nd scale cars that'll stay with this thing.
Chris, I'm interested in the reason you've used a collet on the guide instead of a threaded guide with a guide nut.
Right. Well, back in 1966, they did not have threaded guide nuts.
Yeah,
Authentic. Except for all the other changes.
Well, no, I mean, everything that was done in the day, I mean, there you can see the nuts. So that's a 540 threaded axle. Axle tubes back in the day, everybody used to do those. This piece is not a made piece. This is the stock AMT motor mount at the back, just polished up a little bit. I used 1/8 inch axles, 1/8 inch axles, a period gear. Anything that was done to the motor basically could have been done in 1966. So the old 1966, early 60s braid with a hole in it, and then you attached on the top of the guide with screws and stuff. And these collars are, you know, still used today on some car, but anodized guide nuts and drilled out guide nuts and stuff like that didn't show up for years after this thing was done.
What about that wire? Is that like high oxygen copper with a silicone wrap?
Nope, that's a variation of a Marklin wire that was out, and that's pretty much period correct as well.
Dang it. Can't catch him at anything.
Yeah,
You know, when you consider that this thing is 24 scale, and I personally never had a 24 scale car in my hand, that motor still looks like a whopper.
It is. It's a 36D. An S-can would probably, if the back of the S-can was here, the S-can would probably come to about here. And about this is 2.5 to 3 times the size of an S. It's huge. And it weighs, it's got great big honking magnets in it, and it's got a big diameter stack. Also a long stack, and this weighs as much as most 32nd scale slot cars, for God's sake.
Yeah, I've got one of those in my pillar drill, Chris. I've got one of those powering my pillar drill.
Yep, they're cool motors.
I was going to ask you, what year's the paint and decals?
Sorry?
What year are the paint and decals?
What year?
Yeah, I'll just try to catch you out.
The paint is from about 2.5 weeks ago. Interestingly enough,
got you at last.
I was looking.
Cruel.
There was a guy. The color scheme I got. I've got too many bloody blue or red Lola T70s, and there's. So I was looking through some of the old online sports car racing, websites. And in 1970 and 71, there was a guy in the States named Vic Francie who bought one of the customer McLaren M12s, and it was sponsored by the Great Western Champagne Company. And it was this light gold color. So Tamiya now makes a champagne gold. And so I decided to use that. So his was on a McLaren M12, mine's on a Lola T70. It's not, it is a fantasy livery, but it was sort of done back then.
Yeah, well, it's a period correct fantasy livery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. Hi, Paul. Have you got any pictures underneath it, Chris? Underneath of the chassis?
Underneath this?
Yeah.
It doesn't look great. Like, it's just, there's no motor cutout. So this motor sits, this brass plate extends. So it basically looks like the top without the motor. Like, there's nothing, there's no real weird looking stuff under there.
I don't know why I'm pointing my screen, but I'm interested in the bit between the front of the rotor shaft and the guide.
Oh, in here?
There. Yeah, it's really
okay. This there's a bit of a raised portion here on the chassis plate. This would be like, this is like the female portion, and underneath there's a male portion that sort of fits in and slides along here. This hole here originally, so this front portion can move back or forth to set your wheelbase. And then originally there was a nut and bolt right under here. You just clamp the whole thing down. That it soon became apparent back in the day. It was hard to clamp this down and not have the chassis twist up a little bit. So what the guys would do is make sure the clearance along this piece and this piece was all nice and flat, put it in a jig, set your wheelbase, make sure that everything's flat and square, and then just solder the whole bloody mess together.
And I guess if you didn't want it square, you'd put it in an adjusto jig, right?
Well, you could do that.
Or fry a wall.
Actually, hang on. I might have, now that you brought it up, I might have, I don't have. I'll dig one up, Martin, and later on I'll dig out a picture of the bottom. I think I've got one. So, but I don't have one. I got to go somewhere else to find it.
That's great. Thanks, Chris.
And that takes me a long time to go somewhere else and find it.
Well, that's absolutely beautiful, Chris.
Yeah, that's a great looking car. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. And does anybody else have anything they want to show and tell? New car, new tool?
I'm not showing mine now.
Go ahead.
Come on.
Come on. We like your stuff.
Are we going to guess the color? Oh,
Yeah.
it's blue and yellow. Wow, what a surprise.
Why? What were you going to say?
Now, which car is that?
That's the Nissan.
Yeah. Was God and the thing.
That's the sideways Nissan.
Looking good.
And is that wing the correct dimensions? I mean, did they run such a small wing
Yeah.
in reality?
Yeah, these ones did.
Well, it's probably because that diffuser on the bottom would, oh my gosh, it would take the manhole covers off.
Yeah, that's a J series car, though, isn't it? For the Japan series.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had the really tight wings, didn't they?
And they were adjustable ones because you look, I think they could adjust them in the, I don't know if you can see
On the
it.
fly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But come out.
They ran that car in South Africa one time as a Group 5 car, and it ran with that same little wing.
That's what it is now in this country. That's what they are released over here as Group 5s.
Yep.
And I've got rid of the Spaceman.
Yep. So did you replace the entire figure, or?
Yeah, it's a nightmare to get out because you can't take the interior out. You've got to just carve away at the bottom where they've welded him in, and half the seat comes away with it still. So that's a slotted one. That's out the one that my granddaughter destroyed out the Nissan, the slotted Nissan. So I salvaged the man and fitted him in.
There you go. Looks better now.
I've been replacing the NSR drivers in their Formula One cars with those beautifully painted helmets that come from a fellow in Brazil called the company's called Interlagos Miniatures, and he makes these beautifully hand painted interiors. Oh, not interiors, driver helmets with Senna and Prost and PK and Mansell and so on, absolutely right, correct to scale, and it's actually very easy on the NSR cars because that if you pull on the driver's helmet, it just comes straight out.
Straight out.
Yep. So you don't have to dig anything out. You just pull the driver's helmet off, put another helmet on, and with a decent sized head, then everything looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's just like the real world. That's what you do with a real driver too. You just
you just put his head off. Yeah.
On the white kits, you get two heads. You get full face and open face. So
on whose white kits?
NSR.
Oh, that sounds cool. I've
Yeah.
never seen that.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for sharing, Paul. Does anybody else have any new cars, new tools, new toys, anything slot car related they want to show off before we move on to a topic?
I've got some.
All right, show us off, Mike.
So I got the Nissan.
Oh, slot it?
Yeah, nice little car.
Yeah, and the NSR. And I love the yellow and green.
Blue and yellow.
Yeah, blue and yellow.
That's next.
Okay.
But I like the green better anyway. I also got this just for fun. Another Maserati Trofeo.
NSR or Scalextric?
No, that's Scalextric.
Oh.
Looking good. Have you put them on the track yet?
Yes. The NSR goes quite well. I'm trying to pull a magnet up gradually and see what I can do. If you can, with the NSRs, you can push the magnet up and you lose your downforce. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to get that.
Just
keep pushing.
Take it out.
Yeah, keep pushing till it comes right out.
Well, I don't want to go all the way.
Oh, yeah, you just don't know it yet.
Not on a cold track in my garage.
I don't know. NSR tires grip pretty well no matter what temperature my track is. But yeah.
Well, I don't know. With my curvy track, it's pretty much all over the place without the magnet.
Do you see this thing behind me? Okay.
There's not enough curves in that.
There's 3 different compounds with R1 turns in there.
Yeah.
That separates men from boys over here.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
It's the most technical track in all of the tracks in the clubs.
Yeah, I'm definitely a boy. I'm regressing.
Well, we look forward to hearing your progress on your magnet experiments, and eventually expect it to be gone completely, but in your own time.
Yeah, I haven't raced with my buddy for a while, so we've been closed up because of COVID being so heavy duty these days. And so I'm hoping, in the next month or so that we can get back together. But he hates driving without magnets, and even the stock magnets are not sufficient. We did 2 of the Scalextric Camaros, and I set mine up, and he said, let's just do this with 1 additional magnet to the stock one. And I said, okay. And he actually accused me of cheating and made me take the car apart to one day. It was good-hearted.
I'm cheating, and if I didn't win, you must be cheating.
Well, I beat him badly. So,
Greg, could I butt in and shit? I think I might try my first screen share here. I've got the under picture of one of those Amt chassis out of my pictures gallery here. I think I just tried.
Oh, you're gonna beat Chris to the punch.
Yeah, it's about like Halley's Comet coming, isn't it? Someone. Just a minute.
Well, while the Big Den is bringing up that picture, Mike, your best bet, if you really want to go magless, just pull it and force yourself to learn how to drive magless. And then when your friend comes over to race and you're like driving a magless car around as if it had a magnet in it, he'll be like, "What the heck? How is this possible?"
my finger's not that good.
It'll get there. You just have to make it happen. You have to just pull the Band-Aid off, just get rid of the training wheels and force yourself to learn how to brake early.
Yeah, Mike, your calves are going to take a pounding because you stand on tiptoes when you get to every bend. Yeah, you really do. And then when you get into it, it's worth it.
But put it this way, you'll have a nice firm butt by the time you finish because you'll really be exercising those muscles too, right?
She who must be
Or you rely on the barrier.
Yeah.
You get that for Christmas.
I didn't.
I did.
Butticizer?
I think I have the Carrera version of that.
That is the Carrera version.
Oh, okay. I must have an
But
early.
I've never seen a set of tires like that before. Not even on the 124 stuff.
Oh, yeah. Their Can-Am tires are crazy. Yeah, I've got the McLaren, the Carrera Mclaren, and it's just super wide.
I think it might be a wee bit out of scale, no?
The Carrera Mclaren's tires are not anywhere near as wide as the 917. The 917's things are like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch wide, maybe nearly an inch wide. They're massive.
Wow. I guess I don't have a 917, otherwise I would think the McLarens are small.
Dennis, that's a really interesting rogues gallery over your right shoulder.
Yeah.
Up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a bunch out in my garage. I just have a bunch of posters and crap on the walls that I've collected over many years. A lot of those posters are from big 124 scale retro races, the ones along the Surway. The ones above that are things that I have inherited or brought with me from South Africa. Even the big one up the top there, I don't know if you can see that big one with the Audis on it. It's a Dunlop one from the early days of the British touring cars or the World Touring cars when Audi had that the 4-wheel drive A4s that they ran. And so there's just a whole bunch of that kind of stuff out here. This garage only incidentally stores a car. It's a double garage, and you could never get more than one in here. Usually, I take it out. Today it's cold, and they were cutting trees outside, so the car is still indoors. But I'm out here because I'm busy with customer chips and things, putting lighting kits into BRM cars and Carrera digital chips into them for customers.
What's the lighting kit of choice into a BRM?
I buy I buy the LEDs individually. I buy them like 20 at a time, and I wire them up myself, especially when I'm working with a Carrera digital chip, because they have all the drivers for the diodes on the board already, and so it makes it very easy. You just hook up the diodes, glue them into the body, put a little bit of wire on them, and either solder them straight onto the chip or use the little plugs that they have, and away you go.
Dennis, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you hook up this Carrera lights for a Scalextric chip? You have to put a diode in, or
Depends on the chip.
Oh, if you have a Carrera car and you've put a Scalextric chip into it,
correct.
I usually tell our customers, sorry, you've lost the lights. I don't try, because the Scalextric chips don't drive the lights. The lights on the Scalextric car are driven off of the supply to the motor.
Yeah.
And so the chances are that you may blow the little LEDs that Carrera use.
So what's the solution?
Can I butt in here?
Yeah,
sure.
Please,
It depends on the chip. Some Scalextric digital chips don't have any support for lights. For example, the single seater, the F1 chip, has no light support whatsoever. The original saloon car chip had pads to solder to and resistors and everything on board. And then later on, they dropped the resistors, but the pads are still there, so you could bridge where the resistors went and get lights, and it was still 5 volts. It was still proper LED, lighting. But there's also the slotted chips, which have light support via an additional plug, or the most recent Scalextric digital DPR, the standard saloon DPR, the big rectangle one, has solder pads right there on it. They're even labeled headlights, brake lights. You can just stick a wire in there and solder right to the chip.
Yeah. Oh, you have to solder it right to the chip then.
I mean,
I
you
don't know
can
if that's
solder a connector. I mean, what I've done with a Carrera digital car that had lights is I happen to have one of those older chips, but I could do the same thing with this new DPR chip. And what I did was wire. I stole connectors because I didn't have compatible connectors, but you can find and purchase the compatible connectors for the Carrera lights connectors, and then soldered those to the chip. And then I could plug and unplug the Scalextric chip and then plug back in the Carrera chip if I wanted to.
Oh, I see.
With all on plugs. So
well, on a related thing about those connectors, I haven't been able to find the connectors for the Scalextric chip to plug it in and with pigtails on them to use, and I've been solder them to the chip to make them work, which works. But it's preferable if you blow the chip or have another problem with it that you can unplug it. So where do you get the plug assemblies? Do you know?
I bought a pack of 100 of them off of eBay several years ago. So
okay.
If you're in the States, I'll just mail you some if you want. Hook up with me later and I'll just mail you some. There's a forum post out there somewhere that specifies exactly what pin, pitch, and type of connector it is, and that once you have that information, then you just search eBay or Amazon for it and order up a bunch. It's out there with the wires in it and everything.
Okay, I'll give you an email.
Yeah, we'll make sure that information is somewhere.
Thank you, Greg. That's great information.
Yeah, and that's probably the most annoying thing is that Scalextric got rid of lights powered by the digital chip and then put them back, and there have been several chip iterations since the beginning. And of course, Slothead has their own versions. So yeah,
what I've found so far is when you use the slotted chip, if you want to retain a certain amount of your interior, that sometimes you have to actually cut the hole of the light socket right away, because it just extends into an area where there's just too much interior in the car. So it's always a bit of a, there's always this bit of a trade-off between, do I have decent interior and nice scale looks, or do I have a digital car? Because you know, the chips take up quite a lot of space.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate Carrera's method of putting connectors on leads, so that
Yeah,
those
it's
can be
great.
moved out of the way, and you know, doing that exact same kind of thing with the with the Scalextric digital chips or any other brand of chips. I mean, even if it has a plug on it, with some care, you can remove a plug and solder the wires that the plug is connecting.
Don't do that quite often
Solder,
too,
or put the plug on leads or whatever you want to do. You know, it can all be done, but I definitely prefer when there's already plugs ready to go, like Carrera does, or there's really easy to solder to, pads or through hole solder connections, like the most recent Scalextric DPR chip that I mentioned. You know, just easy to put the wire through and wick some solder in there. You know, you don't need to be a super steady surgeon hand or have really good vision to do it. Like, I've seen some guys wiring straight to the actual microprocessor on there, just because there are no other places to have the output, to tap into that output is other than from the microprocessor itself. And it's like, okay, bro, you do you.
I've actually had to cut away the plastic surround, leave the pins standing up, and solder direct onto the pins a couple of times.
That's what I do.
No, thank you.
No. I could do it at home when I've got all my nice stuff, but if I'm sitting in the Electric Dream store, I don't always have all the tools that I have at home, and I don't have a decent tiny soldering iron there, and so it becomes an exercise in controlling the shakes. You know, those tools shake. I don't know what it is, but the tools shake somewhere.
Yeah, usually when I'm presented with that kind of situation, I just say, no, I'm okay without lights. Scott, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I gotta head out here pretty quick, but I was hoping Steve would be here. I've run into a bit of a challenge printing my Autocoast TI-22 body, and maybe one of the 3D printing geniuses here can explain what I've done wrong or what's gone wrong.
You got a picture?
Can I share?
Yeah, go ahead.
Greg's as good a genius as any. Oh, you are.
I'm good at 3D printing, but
You're
Steve definitely has the expertise in slot car bodies specifically. But yeah, I can probably recognize the problem once I see it. All right, so now we see your email program. Okay.
Okay. This is the front lip of the body. You know, there's the center area.
Okay,
and
that's
where the arrow is now.
Uh-huh.
When it goes into the slicer,
I mean, if you got your slicer open, you can show us that too.
I don't have it loaded in the slicer right now.
Okay, but you got another picture.
We've got this void area that shows up.
That's a thin wall. So
he says, okay, maybe that, pardon?
That's a thin wall. So you have two choices. The first choice is, depending on your slicer, that doesn't look like Prusa slicer, so I'm not sure if Cura has a similar choice, but
yeah, it's Cura.
There's some kind of option that will tell the slicer to go ahead and extrude and a minimal extrusion, even when the thickness of the thing is smaller than the smallest extrusion. So you got a 0.4 nozzle. Its smallest extrusion is going to be, 0.4 or maybe 0.35 or something like that. That piece of that wall is probably like 0.2 millimeters thick. And so it just says, well, that's too thin for me to print with a 0.4 nozzle, so I'm not gonna. But usually an option you can click on, or check a box or something, says print it anyways. I don't care if it's a little thick. And so it'll put material there.
I'm curious why that it would be just the one area of that lip, which should be pretty much the same thickness all the way across.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that affect how a slicer decides to calculate extrusion. Could be something on either side of it.
Right. I'm curious, see, I've got it set now to print on its side.
Okay.
And if I set it to print on its base, that problem would probably disappear. But what I'm concerned about now is that the sides are thin because Steve went to so much effort to thin these down. So yeah, I'll figure it out. Worst case scenario, I figure I can just square it out and glue in a piece of styrene and make it all better as far as that.
That's
Yeah.
for sure. That's your worst option. That's your last option. There are a couple other things you can do in the slicer.
There's a bunch of us scratch builders that are still scratch building our 3D prints.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's for sure.
you know, scabbing in a piece of plastic's a pretty easy job if it has to be done. I'd rather not, but if I have to, that's no big deal on that. And then to show off a little bit, these bodies, you know, most of you guys maybe know, maybe don't, but the bodies aren't necessarily scale. You have to find your scale percentage. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to find the wheelbase of the body and scale it pretty accurately. I also, one of the guys that's in the proxy sent me the file from the BRM engine. See if I can find it really quickly. And my,
did you want
it needed to be scaled also. It was awfully big. And so I looked up, you know, how long is a big block Chevrolet engine? Well, what it did was I found apparently an installed length. So I scaled the engine down, judging by the grids on the slicer, you know, where it shows the centimeter grid, and went with that, printed it up for an hour and a half. And I was looking at that and said, man, that thing looks huge. Well, I compared it with a 1/24th model kit valve cover. And guess what? I printed a perfectly 24th scale engine for my 32nd scale car. The
should go fast.
Yeah, there you go. Now I just need one of your 36D motors there, Chris, and we'll be completely set. But so what I did apparently was get the installed length, which includes the accessories on the front of the engine, and it so if I have to scale it down a little more, obviously.
So did you want to hear the other solutions to the thin wall problem, or just show?
Sure.
So if you can't find an option to tell your slicer to print thin walls, in Prusa Slicer, it's called detect thin walls. You know, Cura calls it something different, I'm sure. If you can't find that option, then one of the things you can do, well, there's two other things that I can think of. The first one is to tell your slicer that your nozzle or that your perimeter extrusion thickness or extrusion width is thinner, right? So if you look in your extrusion widths for various types of parts of the print, you know, walls versus infill versus, you know, support and all that stuff, it'll have different extrusion widths for all those things. Look for the perimeter one or the wall one and set it to, like, it's probably 0.4 or 0.42 right now if you have a 0.4 nozzle. Set it to 0.35 and see what happens. The printer will print that just fine. It'll basically just be a little bit less pressure as it's dragging along, right? So a little bit less comes out. And if it shows it in the slicer, then it's going to print something and it might look great. The third and final one that comes to mind, I don't always recommend it, because when you're talking about something that has to have correct proportionality, and especially with parts that are, you know, there's some kind of mechanical component, it needs to fit a nut or a screw or whatever like that, is XY compensation, which is essentially bloating it a little bit. So you're telling it to compensate a 0.3 millimeter thick wall by, let's say, you know, 0.05, right? And so it's going to bloat that 0.3 millimeter thick wall to 0.35. And that might be thick enough for your slicer to say, okay, I'll print that. You might have to compensate 0.1 so that it thickens that to a full 0.4 thick wall. But the problem is that's going to happen all over the model.
Would be on. I was going to say that ends up being all over the model then. Yeah, I'd just as soon not add that weight for that solution, which sounds like it would obviously work in a lot of circumstances. I'd rather just scab in a piece of plastic, but I'll try your other idea, and see what I can do there. Yeah, and make that happen.
The thin wall detection is your go-to for that kind of thing, because it's not going to thicken up other stuff that's already the right thickness to print. But
it's just going to detect the areas that it identifies as being thin.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm pretty positive. I'm 99% sure Cura has that kind of feature. I just don't know what it's called.
Sure. Nope. We'll look and try and find that. Thanks very much. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much. I got a client coming in, so I got to run.
Thanks for coming,
Yeah.
Scott. See you next time.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Scott.
All right. So my next question is, did Big Den or Chris find a picture of the bottom of that chassis first? Big Den, did you find a picture of the bottom of that chassis?
Yes, Greg, I found the picture, but I haven't been able to get, I've got my screen there, but when I go to share screen, here we go.
After you click it, then you got to click share again down there. There we go.
Okay, so you can see that one all right?
Yep, so that's the top.
That's pretty much the view that Chris had up.
Yep.
And that's the underneath view.
There you go, Martin.
And you can see the little screw, the little fixing screw in there. And then just got you see that the body in the background wasn't an original AMT. It was from from a plastic kit, so 24th kit. And you see knockoffs on the front wheels, and but these were made out of industrial rubber, these back tyres, so they're definitely not genuine. But these were pictures I took for eBay, so I don't have the car anymore, probably sadly, but that's it. Okay, then.
Awesome. Thanks for digging that up.
There you go. Right.
Yes, thanks, Dan. Dan, how do you pronounce your hometown again?
It's Launceston, like different to your Launceston down in Cornwall.
Yeah, well, I used to live about 8 miles from it. It's Lansing down there.
Oh, Lansing.
Lansing. Up near Bartman.
We're definitely Launceston down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a Tamar River. You got a Tamar River there, or?
Yeah, it's down the other coast, though.
Yep. Okay, then.
All right, you guys with your Cockney or whatever the heck accent you guys are using. I don't know.
That's not Cockney.
I know it's not, and I'm sure I don't want to hear genuine Cockney.
I'm not going to say nothing.
Moving on, does anybody else have any show and tell they want to show before I dig into our topic basket?
Actually, yes.
Martin, other things, slot related things.
Actually, yes. Although this is not a slot car.
Okay. Yeah.
One of my friends who I race with the pandemic shutdown, he's been back working on a lot of models, and from time to time he sends me something, a little video or whatever. This is about 50 seconds long. I've shared my screen. Now, let me see if I can get it up here. There we go. And he just loves doing these kinds of bodies.
Oh, nice. Wow. Nice. Yeah, so he's.
I take it that's 1/24th scale then?
Yes.
Beautiful.
But he enjoys doing these things. He's got the rust look down perfectly. He had another one that he had sent me, and I looked at it and I said the only thing missing was the mud behind the rear wheels.
Yeah, and a motor and a guide blade.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, good stuff.
Speaking of guide blades, can I engage with Leo on his 1/43rd scale proxy car that he showed us? He showed us a 3D printed chassis. I think it was about a week, maybe a fortnight ago. Leo, are you there?
Yes. Yeah.
Go for it.
I wondered if you'd had an opportunity to finish building and running that chassis.
Yes and no. Yes, I have, and it seems to work fine. As Chris Walker mentioned, with Chris Walker commenting on the chassis at that point when you saw it.
Yes, it was, guide blade rotation, I think it was.
Yeah, the angle of rotation of the guide. So yes, Chris is right. It does tend to lock. If it spins out, it locks and then bounces back. Doesn't tend to deslot, thankfully. So I've not done anything about it. But it does. It whizzes around, stops, hesitates for a fraction of a second, and then continues. So it
Well, I
does
think you
work
said at
quite
the time
well.
that your rule set wouldn't allow you to modify that. But of particular interest to me was your 3D printed guide, and how is that surviving in your slot?
Quite well. And there's the rub. You see the construction of it. It's in 3 parts. There's the sort of main upper part, the
braid
horizontal
plate
bit.
part, yeah.
And then the blade consists of 2 parts, which are super glued into the cross part, the header.
And then
so
it looked like you put the screw all the way down the blade.
Yes, and the screw goes down into the gap between the 2 sections of the blade.
So is that screw not going to touch the walls of the slot?
No, it's the screw diameter. The thread diameter is, I think, 1.4 millimeters, so it's pretty small. And it's about probably about the same width as the blade. So the blade is
well. It looked that way. It looked like I could actually see that from the side of the blade. I could see where the thread was going to go.
Yeah.
But what I was interested, obviously, now you've banged this blade around a little bit left and right. You've not managed to snap it, yeah?
No. And what I was going to say was that I'm running it on my Ninco track. I don't know if you ever had experience with a Ninco track, but sometimes the joins between the sections close up. So it has. When I first ran it round, it snagged on a couple of those joins. Going at not quite full speed, but pretty much full speed, it locked solid into the join. And I thought, oh my goodness, it'll have broken the guide. But no, it stood up to it well.
Okay, I was wondering if anyone else had got experience with 3D printed guides and whether or not they thought they were a good thing or a bad thing.
I have not yet experimented with 3D printed guides because I have not seen one that I thought, I don't have a need for them, and therefore I haven't seen any that I felt like I needed to print for whatever reason. But it seems like this one that Leo, that one that they're having for the proxy is pretty well designed.
Why would you really want to do one, Wayne? Is it just to do it, or for what's
I'll tell you,
end game?
my interest in that is I absolutely hate the quick change guide on a standard scale electric car. I want to replace.
You can put all kinds of. You can change the scaly guide out for any guide you want pretty easily.
Well, the interesting thing about the scaly guide is it's got a double thickness, a double dimension. It's got a 3.5 millimeter at the very top, but at the bottom, I think it's a whole millimeter wider. So it's a step. It's a stepped stem. Thanks very much, Leo. I can see that.
You can buy adapters that just basically bypass that whole post hole and will take a straight shaft guide blade in it.
Yeah. Well, the reason that, and this is quite independent from the chat, I've got a friend with a 3D printer and he's already started experimenting with 3D printing guides just because he's got the same problem. He wants to overcome it with something stronger. He's been retrofitting a couple of different guides. We've been using, I think, is it a slotting? Is it a scale auto that's red or a slotting plus?
Scale auto.
He's been using some red ones. I think he's had some issues with those being not recognized by his timing equipment. Yep. So I said to him, why don't you just try 3D printing something, and probably in 2 pieces.
Wayne, I'll tell you somebody who has had a lot of success is Richard Perry, Mr. Modifier on Slot Forum.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with him. I've never met him.
Yeah, so you probably might well have met him at Gaydon, actually, not realised. But he makes a sure change guide, I think he calls it. It's the one where you put the sensor in front of the guide for digital lane changing. But
I'm not familiar with that.
He's made some quite robust guides, so it might be worth your friend having a chat with Rich.
Well, my friend's he's been printing the guide blade and stem vertically on his Ender 5 Pro successfully, which he didn't think he would get enough stick on the print bed, but he did. And then he, at my request, he shot us a video of himself putting that guide in a vise and leaning on it until it broke. And it did. It broke with the print lines running front to rear. And then we asked ourselves the question, well, how many G-forces do you actually experience with a slot car on plastic track, wood track, different tires, different weights? You know, and this is an area where you probably can't come up with an answer, although it's bound to be several G-forces, several multiples of the weight of the car. Needless to say, he managed to snap one during assembly, and we've been fiddling around, and now he's printed the blade and stem on its back with supports underneath the stem, and he's now got the braid plate, which is the horizontal part. I'm going to call that the braid plate. Always laid that on his bed, never snapped that part. But the guide stem and blade, now he's printed it in the opposite direction. He's got the thing glued up, and he's got 2 different grain directions. And he said he's managed to snap one in the vise, but it's yet to go in the car and do any laps.
I just, for both Leo and yourself, I mean, one of the biggest failings in a lot of the plastic cars is they're all designed to run with magnets. So they're not designed to slide, because cars with magnets don't slide. They just fly off the track. So guide rotation is, you know, how many G-forces? I don't know the G-forces, save to say that I see a lot of plastic chassis break at the guide post hole and or the guide plate. So there's whatever the number is sort of irrelevant. It happens fairly regularly. If you can design a little more guide rotation in there, you will never break a guide post hole or never break a guide.
Well, that's an element of designing the chassis. I don't think there's anything about the actual guide that you could do to change that. You've got to find, there's got to be somewhere to push your ferrule against your braid, and that's just the thing that stops the rotation. But we don't do too bad. We've been running Scalextric standard cars amongst others, but the most basic cars we've been using are Scalextric, and they've got enough guide rotation for us to get a pretty severe angle. We don't tend to snap the base plates. We do run uprated tires, and apart from that, the cars are pretty well standard in the events I'm talking about. So, but yeah, guide rotation is one thing, but I was wondering about just the things like the coefficient of friction of PLA versus ABS, which is probably what most guides are, and what the NSR white guide is made of. I mean, NSR sell a guide that says it's called no friction. What the heck does no friction mean? It can't be no friction.
No, it'll be low friction. I think those ones are Teflon. The NSR guides, it's molded Teflon.
Yeah, PTFE, is generic Teflon, so they probably have it printed out of, or nylon, which is pretty low friction. PLA and ABS, most printed plastics. I mean, it depends on the formula. I have PLA, and I make little fidgets with magnets that you slide back and forth. And I have some PLA when I put them together, it slides no problem. And then I have some. Everything else is the same. Technically, they're both PLA, but a different brand of PLA, and it's got tons of friction. But that's being pulled together. That's being pulled together hard by opposing magnets with plastic in between them. So that's not what you're going to get with a printed guide in a slot. Honestly, if anything, I'd say maybe not PLA, if only because the melting temperature is so much lower. So if there is friction, then it'll warm up and start deforming before.
Yeah. I think it's about 45, 50 degrees C and you start getting melting. Is that right?
I mean, it can start to deform at a fairly, inside a hot car, it'll start to deform. So 40, 50.
Oh, that can be higher than 50, that can.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it would have to generate a good amount of friction, which means there's some other problem, right? The guide is too thick, or your slot is too narrow, or there's other issues causing the friction. I don't think the plastic itself is going to be a source of the friction.
I would think, Wayne, in using hundreds and hundreds of different types of guides over the years, that if I was designing a 3D guide, the last thing on my mind ever would be how much friction is involved in that blade, because you know, the other thing, a quick aside, everybody is like NSR is going to say ultra low friction, and Scale Auto is going to go super ultra low friction.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
measure any of this stuff. It's just a phrase they stick on
Marketing.
the outside of the bag. It's
Yeah.
marketing. So whether you're using, and I am a 3D print idiot. But I can tell you right now, if you're using resin or PLA or any of the substances you use, if the guy's designed well, any minor coefficient of fraction is not going to make bugger all difference from a practical sense in 30-second scale club racing.
Oh no.
Would you like me to find a photograph of it and show it to you?
Sure.
If you want.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to move on for a little while. I'll have to browse the machine or browse the web and find the photo, and I'll come back to you when I've done that.
I was gonna say that you know, you guys were talking about chassis breaking and stuff like that. I'm thinking to myself, you've got to have a pretty nasty crack of a crash, usually with magnets, somebody holding the trigger without slowing down at all into a sharp turn kind of thing, to be breaking the chassis, the guide mounting post instead of the guide, in which case I would prefer that the guide break at that point, because it's a whole lot easier to swap out a guide than it is to replace the entire chassis on a plastic.
Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way.
Unfortunately not, but that's one place that I can see slightly easier breaking guides to be slightly
an advantage. Yes.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, the guide broke, cool, but at least the chassis didn't break. I can print another guide. I've got a pile of guides I've already printed just because I figured they'd break easy. Because if you're not going to break the guide from just normal driving and a little bit of drifting. You're going to break the guide when you freaking crash your car. So play some crash and burn racing for a while, and you won't break any more guides.
Even in the 80s, when we was using
can you see that?
It didn't break.
Yeah.
Yep. Top down.
Yeah, I saw that one. I saw that one somewhere else. That looks really good.
So this is the first go at it, I believe.
That's
you
all
can see how it was constructed. Sorry, Greg?
That's all printed in one piece?
No, that's in two pieces. If you look, can you see the pointer?
Isn't it 3 pieces?
This shim is a separate piece. It should really be a real shim. In fact, I advised that they should be constructed on this piece, the braid plate, and then the blade would come up through the whole thing, and then the joint would be a lot more skookum, a lot stronger.
True.
But I can show you. These are his progress so far, and he managed to get all of those guys to print properly that way.
That's how he printed the guides?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So what's the point of making it two pieces?
No supports. No supports.
I mean, I guess, but you're not taking advantage. You're not eliminating the weak point of the layer adhesion by doing it that way.
Yeah.
Why not lay it down?
That's just there, isn't it?
If you lay it down on its side, though, it would be much stronger.
Then the post would be difficult to get the post round.
You'd make a squared off round post into a round hole. You put a flat side for the print side, and it would still be fine.
Well, he has since rotated this piece, and he's printed it with this edge against the bed.
That would make it a bit stronger, yeah.
And he's obviously got a layer going this way in it now. And when you put that together with the original, that original braid plate, he's done the same tests and discovered that it's stronger. So here's another question. This brings to mind another question. What's the best glue to use to stick PLA together with?
There's a chemical that you can get that does a proper chemical bond. It's expensive. Otherwise, I just use regular CA glue.
Well, I have one experience with CA glue. It's the only time I've ever played with PLA parts, and I stuck them together. It would have been nearly an inch square of surface area. And then, as is the way with a lot of modeling things, you want to take it apart and do it differently. So I took to the acetone technique, and I then discovered that it took 4 days for the for it to really make it. I was prying with a screwdriver, trying not to damage the parts and trying to get the acetone to go into the gap, and it never actually worked. And what actually happened was all of the PLA parts that were in the acetone shrank. Probably 5 to 8% shrinkage, and I didn't notice it because it took 4 days. But yeah, my technique for getting rubber tires off of alloy wheels includes the use of acetone, and I thought that would work quite well with my PLA parts, but it didn't. So as far as I'm concerned, CA glue is like a one chance deal with PLA. So dichloromethane.
It's going to depend on the glue. Like if you have real, like if it's actual cyanoacrylate glue,
yeah,
works pretty good. But there's a lot of super glues out there that aren't actual cyanoacrylate glues. They're other chemical compounds. What you should be using right now is dichloromethane, methylene chloride. This
is on the Belgian type, yeah.
This is the chemical that will bond PLA. Just it's a liquid, so you just kind of brush it on lightly, and then put the surfaces together, and they will become one.
And I'm guessing that at 1 liter capacity, that should last about 4 lifetimes.
I would expect that to last a very long time. I have yet to purchase.
How many times you want to take it apart?
No, what you do is you buy your liter and you buy about 20 of those little glass bottles, and you decant it and you make a nice label and you sell it to all your buddies. Right?
I'll put your name on the list, Dennis.
Yeah, you call it NSR plastic bond and sell it.
That's the one.
20 euros.
Yeah.
Plastic bond.
Yeah.
I would think that's a much better proposition, Wayne, because one of the issues with CA, most of them have extremely low shear strength. So you can, separate the blade from the top fairly easily.
Yeah, usually when I want 2 pieces to be permanent, I'll design some method of assembly. Yeah, I mean, just glue isn't always the right way. Doesn't always function.
6-inch now works for me.
What's that?
Greg.
6-inch now works for me.
Greg, does the dichloromethane stick your fingers together?
I don't believe so. I think it basically chemically melts the PLA.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a similar fashion to like styrene solvent, which is basically carbon tetrachloride.
Yeah, like exactly like styrene solvent, exactly like acetone with ABS. And if you're printing ABS, you can stick them together quite nicely with acetone. But yeah, so I would expect it not to stick my fingers together.
Excellent.
But I'll let you know if I buy some and I stick my fingers together. I'll definitely come on here and say, don't coat your fingers in PLA and then use this chemical.
Yeah, just remember to read the hazard notes on it just in case, though.
Yeah, don't drink it.
Don't drink it. Don't sniff it. Don't stick your fingers together or your lips.
What's the use of
I've
that,
had some
guys?
luck
Come on.
using
Live a little.
PLA by first brushing it lightly with acetone before I applied the CA. It gives you a little bit more working time because the CA doesn't harden up quite as quickly. And so it does give you a little bit of more of a manipulation time to manipulate the part, and the bond seems just as strong. And I think the acetone also helps dissolve the PLA a little bit. So might be something you want to try, and especially if it's something you need to fit, where you can't just drop it in place and it's perfect. If you need to drop it on and move it a little bit, brush a little acetone on the parts first, apply the CA, and then apply the part. And it's worked fairly well for me.
But after what Wayne said about acetone making a 3D print act like a frightened turtle, do you have to be careful?
Well, that's if you let it soak in the stuff. It's definitely not the right.
Yeah. This was submerged for 4 days, this piece. But this was the offending piece, and this was the guide holder. And if you can see on the center part of the chassis there's a 2mm square ridge to match with this 2mm square recess in the center. So that sits on there like that and gives you the, it actually gives you about, I'm going to say not quite an inch square of area to stick one to the other.
Yeah.
So this is meant to, whoop,
I'm not
sorry
surprised
about that.
that stuck together very well with a ridge.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. It stuck very, very well. And eventually the chassis, it's curved in every direction and it's actually twisted. And then I took a slotted pod, which is this like you can see the deformation here, look. But this hole, these 4 screw holes here, they don't line up. The pod doesn't fit in the hole or anything. And that all I was trying to do was disconnect this guide holder.
Yeah,
So
because with that channel, the guide holder was fitting over the channel in a ridge, and so you're basically fighting both shear and tensile strength of the glue.
Yeah. Strong design, I think. Yeah.
I'm curious.
This is the same friend of mine that's produced this, and this is one of his first goes at it, and he can make this without wheel wells. He can make it without the hole, and he would send this as a rectangle, and it would be something that you can scissor to fit into any body shell. I've done that in this area here. I actually sent him the wheelbase dimensions and this dimension and this dimension and the axle to guide dimension, and he printed it bespoke so that I didn't have any cutting to do. But he will sell that. He does sell that as a blank rectangle with all the relevant pieces. This is the guide holder. He's also got a front axle holder. I can't show it to you all right now because it's not to hand. I had to fetch that piece. And he's printed me this one as a replacement for the first white one, which is done. Like I say, it's not done. The outside's not yet done to fit the body shell I'm going to use.
What body are you thinking of using for it?
I knew that would come up. I've got it here. I've got one here. I thought that would come up.
Inquiring minds have to know.
Underneath my laptop, in the box that's being used to support it, is the broken Scalextric Mercedes Clk Dtm. I've got 2 of these. I can't remember why or how I acquired them some time ago. And it's the older Sidewinder chassis, and they crack underneath the axle slot. If you pop the axles in and out too many times, or you take the right crash, you can crack the chassis just there. And equally, if you take the motor in and out, this is one of the motor holding lugs, and this lug's completely broken off. It should look like that one.
Is that Scaly?
Yes, it's a Scalextric.
Are you sure it wasn't the magnet that broke it?
Nah, yeah, don't comment on the magnet.
Don't you glue
Clk
the
Dtm
bearings or the motor in?
Pardon?
Don't you glue the rear axle bearings or the motor in?
Yes, I tend to use a glue that can be released. I use something along the lines of Evo Stick, an impact adhesive.
But,
if I use super glue, I find them difficult to get out. I have tried it, but I now use like a golden goo, like a Evo Stick or Dunlop Fix-A-Fix, or there are lots of different brands around like that.
That's all.
If you're having issues with breaking chassis like that, and if you do glue the motors and the bushings in, it's very easy to, if you look at a side view of that chassis, there's 2 points where the cups for the axle. If you just relieve those little points a bit, you don't have to spread the chassis out, and the bushings will click in and click out a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, I have had one of these. I have had one of these doing reasonable laps at one of the local. Oh, that's nice. What are you showing me?
That is all hot glued in. You could sit as a slotted pod, and you put the old tape across it so that glue doesn't come through. So the whole of that motor, all the back axle is all held in.
But you haven't glued the pod to the chassis, no?
No, the pod's still independent.
Yeah, I thought you were telling me you glued the pod in.
It's just the motor and the bearings.
Yeah. And you use what? Hot glue?
Yeah.
Yeah, the beauty of that, Wayne, is it peels off really easy.
Ah, yeah. Is there much weight to hot glue?
No.
Because I mean, I've got a hot glue snot gun, and it outputs a bulky load. I just don't know. I've never used it because I just don't like the sight of a load of it.
Yeah, you need a really fine tip on it, Wayne, and it does come out as a very thin bead.
Yeah. I understand the purpose of gluing the motor in, because when the motor's in a chassis like this, it can still rock. Yeah, and I fully understand that to maintain a perfect gear mesh and stop it all from mashing itself, you don't want it rocking, so glue it in.
Also,
But,
on the bodies, you'll find if you look inside the body, there's 2 posts that come down.
Yeah.
That sit above the motor.
Sit on the axle. Yeah,
and
in the interior.
And the motor, it should be. Oh, that one hasn't. Some of them have 2 posts that sit on the motor.
Yeah.
You chop those away, it still allows the body to roll.
Yeah, they're still in this one. This is not the one I've raced. This one's got missing headlamps, headlamp lenses. The one I've raced has a wing, and it was a black one. John Lacey drove, black and silver coloured one. This is the one that's been the donor. So this one is still good to go. And when my friend said, I want a 3D print a chassis, and I've got this idea to put a slotted pod into a flat plate, and what do you want it to fit? I said, well, I've got this that's doing nothing, so please make that fit that. And so I sent him those dimensions, and then yeah, here we go. We've got a Sidewinder 0 offset slotted motor pod that I've owned for probably 15 years. It's very, very old. It's going to be one of the very, I don't know, 15 to 20 years old, that pod is.
Are you restricted by motors?
Pardon?
Are you restricted by keeping the Scalextric motors?
No, yes, no. There's no category for this car. This is not going to fit into any class. This is an exercise in learning to build a chassis that is relatively universal and can be made to fit nearly any body shell that uses a slotted pod. So it increases the performance of said car. And my first problem was getting it down to 60mm track width that fits the body shell, because I had the wrong wheels. I needed a shorter boss on my rear wheels to get this axle back down to 60mm. That was the first lesson. And the reason that the motor is what it is just because that's the one in the donor car. And as you can see, it's not got its guide blade attached, and it's never turned a lap. And this was the thing that was underway, I'm going to say nearly a year ago. And of course, then March happened and everybody went home and stayed there.
I don't have that problem. I've got a wooden track, so.
Yeah.
Well, definitely.
So yeah, I'm not alien to 3D printing. I haven't got a 3D printer. I've got a friend with a 3D printer. We talk often, and he's making some nice bits. He's a slot car man, as you can see.
All right. Thank you very much for showing that, Wayne.
Yeah, yeah.
And definitely keep us posted on
if there's any progress.
Yeah, looking forward to progress things. Does anybody else have anything they want to show and tell? I keep asking that. You guys keep popping up with new things to show and tell. I'm happy to have nothing but show and tell. We're running down to a little more than a half an hour left. I can bring out a topic if nobody has any other show and tell items. Hearing none and seeing no hands being raised, I'm going to break out a topic. And this one should clear our next half hour quite easily. Are even lane lengths important?
No.
Or let me rephrase.
It doesn't matter.
At any point, is it nice to have even lane lengths?
Yes,
I'll
for
go
beginners.
first. Yep, sorry.
I'm showing my bias. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I guess it is, but I mean, even if you have even length lanes, you have different radius corners, so it you know, an inch is not an inch in actual facts when racing. You know, if you're hanging around and just driving with your buddies, I guess you could make a good argument for that, and the perfect track design would be a nice perfect figure 8. if you're to have like completely equal, completely radius lap lengths. If you're in a race, most races require either a time or lap limit for each particular lane. So as you rotate through the lanes, everything equals out, and it really doesn't make much difference. The tracks I have designed, quite frankly, in the past, wood and or plastic, I've designed them to be aesthetically pleasing to me and look like a nice racetrack, and lane lengths have always been a secondary issue as far as I'm concerned.
Totally agree.
Feel free to expand on that. I can talk for a good 10 minutes and you guys, you'll hear most of my opinions, but I want to hear your guys' opinions first. So
I think that
Totally agree. Mine was built in the 80s, and it's all right, it's been shortened from where it got damaged, but because you're rotating, you're running all four lanes during the race, it all evens it out. Exactly the same what Chris said. It evens out.
Dennis, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that it's more, if you're racing with your buddies and you're not racing, then it's more important that the lanes are equally fast and that they're equally long. You want to get to a point where two lanes have roughly the same lap times. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are the same length.
Right.
So, people saying, oh, the lanes should be the same length. No, they should. If you want to even things out, even out the lap times. And that's what Luff does on his tracks. A couple of ways. Sometimes he'll, if you look at the old, on his old slot racer site and you look at some of the tracks he's done, every now and then one lane will detour from where the other lanes are going. And basically he just routes a little extra section to slow down the lap time on that lane so that it's similar to the other lanes. And so, the actual distance is not the important thing. It's how long it takes to complete the lap, I would say.
John?
Yeah, I was going to say that was one of the things actually Chris helped us when we were designing ours, because that was one of my focuses was, oh my gosh, the lanes have to be, which, really you're building a figure eight if you're not careful. So no, he just said, don't worry about that. Go for, features and make it fun to drive. And ironically, the lap lengths are, they're close enough, but from a timing perspective, they're within like 1,000th of each other if you're really pushing a car, which really makes it fun. So it wasn't as important as I thought it would be.
Agreed.
Of course, the classic piece of track that allowed this to be possible is the crossover track. That's the thing that made ovals potentially equidistant lanes. And that's been in most of the track systems that I'm aware of since the very beginning.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that we don't have any crossovers.
No, you don't. And does Carrera even manufacture one? I'm not sure.
Yeah, they do. In fact, we never used them. And we tried it when we first set it up, basically on the floor to try. And honestly, it was down a straight. I mean, you're building a curve into a straight. So it's like, we don't really need it. And when we took it out, we actually had more fun with it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I concur. We avoid crossovers at all opportunity. I think most slot car racers actually do, unless you're racing digital, in which case you've got to think hard about where you put them.
That's for sure. Digital changes it completely.
With the amount of magnets you run, what difference does it make?
Oh, now that's fighting words.
I would dispute your magnets don't slide. Every single one of my magnet cars slides.
What the real burn behind that was that digital equals magnets, and it absolutely does not.
No,
it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Mike, did you want to expand on your opinion, or?
Well, as far as the track length goes, I agree with Dennis that the lap time similarity is more important. One of the things that we did, that my buddy and I did on the one track that we race generally, is put a sort of a loop into the beginning of the straight, and it really changed the dynamic of the racing, because you didn't have, as you said earlier, a point and shoot where you come around a hairpin, you shoot, go straight down, and then hit another hairpin. Once you do that, it causes you to have to do much more driving, and that makes a bigger difference. Also, if you put a squeeze hairpin on them, the radius difference is this is on Scalextric. The radius difference is enough to make the hairpin on the inside much more equal, and makes it easier to get through. And of course, the issue with digital is passing. You have to be able to get the section of track where you can do most passing to be equitable as far as speed goes, and to try and make a good pass, and then have another cross track or an exchange lane change track where you can get past the guy and go on. And a well-executed lane change on and pass on a digital track is a thing of beauty.
Well, no, because most, real racing, the passing happens in a corner. Is there a digital corner sort of passing crossover for any of the systems?
There is, but it has more to do with the speed that you're entering and leaving than anything else.
The corner crossover that's available for Scalextric Sport Digital is actually quite tricky to drive unless you're very experienced with it. It's an elliptical corner. It's either tight going in and easy going out, or the opposite. And the black plastic that you're running on isn't the same shape as the crossover lane changer, and it's actually very, very difficult to drive well. So most digitals that I've come across tend to avoid using that piece.
Okay.
So I'll throw my opinion in, and I won't disagree with anything anybody has said. That's all true. I still prefer even lane lengths for the following reasons. For the analog club that I race with, generally the tracks are 4 lanes, and some of them are have an overpass that evens out the lanes. A big figure 8 with various changes, right, bent up and whatnot, but technically it's a figure 8. None of them use crossovers because that's basically just a crash point. And like John said, putting a crossover in the middle of a straight is just putting a turn in the middle of the straight. I don't like those in any kind of slot cars, except because the digital pieces aren't the same. But for analog racing, when I'm a year ago when we were still racing in person, a lot of us had roughly equivalent cars, and we were roughly equivalent racers as far as skill level is concerned. So when we were on tracks that didn't have even lane lengths, yeah, we rotated. So, when I'm on the outside lane pedaling hard to try to keep up with the guys inside of me, I can tell myself, yeah, I'm going to be on the inside lane later, and I'll be the one ahead of them. But when we're racing those same cars against the same guys on the tracks with even lane lengths, and we're pulling ahead of each other, and we're vying for that, because on one half of the course he's on the inside, and on the other half of the course I'm on the inside. It's a lot more fun for me. It's a lot more fun. Now, I readily admit that doesn't always happen, and the more casual the racing is, the less that's going to happen. When you're both driving to your personal limit, your limit is much more likely to be significantly above or below the guy next to you. If he's coming over to race on your track, you've got home track advantage, you've got whatever, the skill levels are going to vary. But when you're talking about a dozen guys who have been racing on the same tracks for years and years, and they all are much more equivalent as far as car building and race skills, then it's really nice to have a lot more side to side, door to door when the lane lengths are even. That happens more often when the lane lengths are even, in my experience. Now, there's always uneven lane lengths. You've got the fast guy on the outside and the slow guy on the inside, and you're vying for the lead because different cars, different drivers, different lane lengths match up from time to time. That happens too. That's always fun when it happens.
So my track is 3 lanes, right?
Yeah.
And it has a bridge. So the lanes are equal to within less than 1/8 of an inch, and I've measured them.
Yeah, should be.
And yeah, mathematically they should be exactly the same. because all of the radii are common, etc. All of the necessary mass is right, and so those lanes are essentially identical in distance. There is nearly a 0.2 of a second difference between the inside and the outside lane.
The center lane versus the gutter lanes?
No. The one gutter lane is 0.2 of a second slower than the other gutter lane. And the middle lane is right in between the two of them. And it all has to do with the combination of radii and where the radii are. The track, the lane that has the outer or the biggest radii coming onto and off of the main straightaway is the fastest lane. End of it, because the car can pick up more speed going through those wide turns. That particular lane has all of its tight turns right under braking, not really on the acceleration or the high-speed end of the track. So, again, it's a matter of whether the lanes drive equally in terms of lap time, or whether they're equal in terms of distance.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with that. But when you're talking about design, you can't. It's hard. It's a lot harder to design for equivalent lap times without getting getting your car on the track and tuning in.
Oh no, absolutely. I didn't know when I built the track that it was going to be like that, and I designed it to be equal lengths because I have the same approach as you. That it's interesting how it worked out.
Yeah, and I'm not. That's why I'm saying. That's why I started with. I agree with everything you guys have said. I'm not saying that equal lane lengths means that every lane is going to have the same speed, the same lap time. If I drive the same car on all 4 lanes, I'm going to get the same lap time on all 4 lanes. No, I admit there's going to be some differences. But when you're talking about a track that has the outside lane being 2-3 feet longer than the inside lane, that's some extra pedaling that needs to be done.
Oh yeah, sure.
Again, rotation evens it all out in the end. But now I'm going to talk about the digital side of things. And people often say, well, if it's digital and you can choose lanes, then the lane length means even less. And I disagree with that.
Oh, controversial.
Because again, I've been racing some very skillful digital racers for several years. And my track, the inside lane it's not even lane lengths. The inside lane is clearly shorter and faster, even though the inside lane has the tighter turns, faster laps are turned on that inside lane. When we're racing digital on that track, and I've got the guys that are the same skill or near me, either slightly better or not as good, you want to be on the inside lane all the time. Everybody says,
that's true on a track.
That makes perfect sense. But now when I'm behind the guy who's just as good as me, and I want to get in front of him, what do I have to do? I have to get into the outside lane, which is longer, and then he starts pulling away from me because I'm trying to catch up to him in a longer lane. And
that's true on a short track, like Mount Rainier Raceway. It's true, but Wayne will back me up on this. And when you get up on Gary Skip's Le Mans at Henley, oh my God! Watch the Italians changing lanes through the Porsche and the Cranes and all of those guys.
Yeah, that's an interesting example.
Fantastic to see, especially watch the Italians in the dark. I mean, it's bloody amazing how they can pick a fast line through there and overtake. They know where they can overtake you. 3 or 4 changes ahead and bang, 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 they do it. But
that's an interesting one because we've both got experience of that lap, and the busy lane, it's a 4-lane track, and the busy lane tends to be the 3rd lane out, and yet the winners normally use the gutter lane 1. You've noticed this? I mean, I've only done the event twice, but we now know where you need to be if you're going to win. You need to be where all the other cars aren't.
If you're going slow in that gut lane, you get shoveled out pretty quick. Some Italians coming through you, poof, you're out.
You guys are proving my point, but I'm going to say that is going to be the outlier. I mean, seriously, that's like a once a year special event. No track. Nobody's going to race on that kind of track on a regular basis.
No.
But
Rainier behind you, you're true.
This is a small technical track. I readily admit that. But there are other tracks in my digital club, and some of them are twice the size, the lap length of that, or larger. And it holds true. If I'm trying to pass a guy with the same quality car, same trigger finger as me, more or less, I'm basically just waiting for them to crash so that I go in front of them, as opposed to me trying to get around them, unless the lane lengths are even. And one of the guys, my main competitor, his track is considerably longer than this. His track does have a figure 8 so that the lane lengths are even. And it's a very technical track, so it's hard to outdrive him on his own home track. But I am next to him for more than a lap or two when I'm trying to make a pass and don't crash. Whereas if it were if the lane lengths were not even, I'd fall behind him during those laps.
Yeah, I also find that you lose, maybe half a tenth going through a lane changer.
Oh, absolutely. You got to make sure, and that's why I consider it a good pass against a competitive racer is going to be multiple laps. It's not going to be just getting around him. That's not a competitive racer that you're passing.
It's like Formula One. You're teeing the guy up for 3 or 4 laps.
Yeah.
And then you wait for his one slide coming out that bend, and bang, you got him on the next changer.
Yeah.
Despite what we've said, Martin, I don't disagree with anything that Greg said. All the other digital tracks that I've ever used, the inside lane tends to be the quickest lane and the lane to be in. And he's absolutely right. It's really, really difficult when you've got a good driver on your nose, because this is one of the Disca driver guidelines, that the car behind is always the one that's responsible for making a clean pass. Yeah, and the guy in front shouldn't actually change lanes. He should just stay where he is, particularly if he's a slower car and he knows he's a slower car. So that's the unwritten. It isn't an unwritten rule. It's actually written down. It's a guideline, isn't it?
It's the written unwritten law. Yeah,
it's the written down unwritten rule. But I completely agree that the inside lanes and just doing the blocking once you're in front, it's very, very. So, Greg, my question to you is: when you're in those circumstances, what do you try to do? Do you try to get that driver off his pace in his head? Do you try to talk to him? Do you break his will, or what do you do?
This guy is a rock. I'm not gonna talk him out of his racing. It's basically just pacing him as closely as I possibly can. When I feel like I can get to the other lane and not lose too much time, because I have one curve lane changer in there, and the only reason it's in there is a last ditch to the pit lane. Every other lane changer, straight pit lane, straight lane changer near the end of a straight, so you're already braking in order for the turn, right? So you're not having to brake too much earlier for a lane changer. But it's pretty much always, well, okay, we're on the same lap. This is for place, right? So I've got to try to pass him. So then I just go ahead and get into the other lane when I don't think I'm going to lose too much distance, and then just pedal hard and try not to come off. Hope that he's trying hard to stay in front of me enough that he makes a mistake before I make a mistake, either by tailing out too much and bobbling, or by actually crashing. And then I'm elated, of course, because I've got some distance on him, at least for a few seconds, until he gets back on the track and catches up to me.
So I've got a little proposal for you.
I'm sorry, Wayne, go ahead.
I've got a proposal for you, and that is that your best opportunity is probably when that guy you're trying to put the pass on comes up behind another car. And when he has to move out to make that pass, you dive on up the inside and run directly behind the car that he's trying to pass, and block him from coming back in behind, on the basis that he's now out in the boondocks in the dust, and he's got no alternative but to lose time and then eventually pull back in behind you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The other racers on the track become part of the strategy of getting in front of you.
Sure.
What were you going to say, Paul?
I got a car you could borrow. Take him out.
Oh yeah.
It's got such a lovely swing as you come up the inside of someone. It just gently rubs pain.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's somebody in the club who has actually developed a takeout skill. We frown on that, and I have not developed a takeout skill. So I'm not going to try it because basically our crash rules is it favors somebody with good takeout skills. I'll admit to that. But basically, if you're out of the slot for whatever reason, then you get whatever penalty comes to somebody who crashes out of the slot, regardless of why you got out of the slot. But that's mainly because most of the time we're not good takeout artists. If we try to take somebody out, we're likely to take ourselves out in the process of taking somebody else out. And so most of the crashes are unintentional, and sometimes they take the other guy out in the process. So
I've traded paint with Martin a few times in it.
I'm sure he appreciates that.
I think anybody who's raced at a club level or a fairly high level of racing, the better racers in all those clubs are quite experienced at takeout maneuvers.
For sure.
They've been doing it for a lot of years. Typically, obviously, in analog, with the speeds of some of the club cars, you're lapping guys fairly often. So it's again sort of an unwritten. I mean, I've been doing for years is you come up on somebody to lap them, you say, "I'm coming up." If they just relax their finger on the straightaway for a nanosecond, you're by and everybody's clean. If they want to play silly bugger and you're 5 laps ahead of them, I'll follow them for a couple of corners, and then that's enough. Is that it's done, and you just put them off and away you go. And in the digital racing, I know quite a few of the Italian guys, and they adhere to that philosophy extremely well. You're not getting a buy from most of these guys.
So I guess nobody flies.
Sorry, don't speak the language.
I was going to say nobody flies a blue flag in front of anyone's face to say, "Hey."
You have to, the better racers expect you to know who you're behind, who you're ahead of, where you are, and act accordingly. And they'll give you a grace period, but at the end of the day, it's a race. So get the hell out of the way, or I'll make you get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, we kind of have a blue flag rule. Kind of, it's not a written rule in the analog club.
Yeah.
And like you said, the guys who have been in the club for a while kind of understand, when it's clear that they can't maintain a lead, then they'll usually just lift a little bit on the straightaway and let them pass. Sometimes they'll lift near the end of the straightaway to throw off somebody else's braking point judging, but the good racers don't fall for that trick. But the guys who are new, who are still at the stage of able to pull a fast lap but not consistently, have a tendency to a better racer is coming up behind them, they'll race even harder, right, to stay ahead, but forgetting that they're not on the same lap. And so sometimes we'll holler out blue flag or something like that, or just kind of, hey, you're not on the same lap. Why are you fighting so hard? You're going to crash. And then they crash. And then we say, hey, if you'd let off a little bit, you probably wouldn't have crashed and be out of the race now. And you weren't even on the same lap. So why were you trying so hard? I don't love winning so much that I do those things. So I just, if I can't easily maintain a lead on a car, I just let them pass. I'm like, yeah, I'd rather get my laps than crash trying to stay ahead of you. But that's because we play crash and burn. If you're out, you're out. So.
In the 80s, in the brass days, I used to snap 3 30-second drill blanks every meeting, because I'd always get a young or a novice coming up and he'd be slapping me. So I used to put a piece of piano wire over the back axle to protect the rear. And on a 9-foot Superbird, when that swings out as well, that used to act like an anchor on some of the cars.
I've done several years ago. I would put my GoPro on the track and take video of various action scenes and stuff like that. And of course, you can step through the frames and see what actually happened in the crash. So every once in a while, I'd have a crash on video that at the time people were like, oh, you must have crashed into me, you know, you were on the inside, blah, blah, blah. It had to have happened that way. And more or less everybody just says, sorry, you know, whatever. But then I go and look at the video and I step through the frames and I can see the guy on the outside kicked out back in, hit the rear wheel of the other car and got his own self out of the slot, not the other way around. And so by seeing enough of those, I'm like, you know what? What you think happened is not necessarily true. So if you're out, you're out. Just no arguments. Don't care why, because you're probably wrong anyways. If you're out, you're out. Certainly made everything simpler, but we race crash and burn pretty much too. So.
And plus the fact, if you come out, by the time the marshals put you back in, you've lost nearly half a lap anyway.
Yeah, even with marshalling, you don't want to crash.
No.
But you know, and the guys. Oh, sorry, Chris. Go on.
No, that's why it's always better. You know, if you know you're being approached from behind, you know you're not going to keep up. Just blip the throttle for a nanosecond on the straightaway. You're going to lose 6 inches for God's sake, as opposed to half a lap by coming off the track. You know, and the better racers, you guys have raced with a lot of good drivers, especially you know, a lot of the European guys. They know exactly what's going on. They know who's ahead of them, who's behind them. I mean, so often you race with new guys and, you know, there's a car off on the track 2 feet in front of where they are, and they hit the car. They're looking at their car. They're not looking ahead to understand it's just like real racing. The better racers are sort of standing back a bit and sort of looking 2 corners ahead and knowing what's going on, and you know, being on the outside. Should you be on the outside? You put yourself in that position to have a problem by being on the outside in that corner. The good racers will not put themselves in that position.
Yeah, it's like they say in 1-to-1, the good racers look up, average racers look down.
Right.
But in the clubs I race at, I know the guys who are going to come up to lap and they're going to want to try and race me. And conversely, I know the guys who are going to come past me twice in a heat. So I just call them, say, you know, next straight, go.
Yep.
So I just, like you said, you just lift them back on. It's only a tiny blip of a lift and the guy's gone. He's not in the same race as me. He's racing, you know, the top echelon guys, not the mid-pack guys like I am.
Right. No. And I mean, all those guys appreciate that too. They'll you know, oftentimes a guy will give you a nod or say thank you very kindly, and you know, get better, get faster, and then your turn will come on that.
Well, maybe with a bit of luck, you'll put my car back on faster when he's marshalling.
Well, you won't put it on any slower.
Yeah.
I'll admit there's one guy in my analog club that kind of bugs me because he's a takeout artist. He knows how to take somebody out. When he's on the inside, he can make it happen, and you won't even know what hit you. That's him, but he's a good boy. He keeps his skills under wraps most of the time, but he has a tendency to try to pass on the outside. And I'm not a bad racer. He's better than me, but I'm not going to let him pass because I can usually hold my own. But sometimes he'll you know, he's been with the club longer, so he probably still assumes that he's always going to be better than me. But he's not. But he'll still try to pass on the outside. I'm like, I'm trying to drive as clean as I can. I am not swinging out to try to take you out. You passed me on the outside as I came out of the turn, and it bobbled a little bit, just like every freaking buddy does. And then you get pissed when you get taken out because you tried to pass me on the outside. Sorry, bro, that wasn't me. That was you. You made a bad decision right then. If you just held off, I'd have let you pass on the straightaway if you had just held off for 5 freaking seconds.
Well, two corners time, he's on the inside, so yeah.
Yeah.
Use your racecraft.
I in the 80s, I grew up racing against Dave Harvey. Well, Dave Harvey in this country was a Bresca world champion, and when he's come down behind you, when he come up behind you, it double do you. He'll either take you out or let you go through and then take you on the next corner. But he'd never ever shout. He never saves coming up behind you. You had to have eyes in the back of your head because you could see him come up, and all of a sudden you think, "Shit, all right, I'll hang up." And then once he done it to you once, you learn. You never ever, when you see that car come up behind you, you just eased off, let him go.
Yeah,
And that's what you have to do when you go to an international race. I mean, I've been racing RC cars at national level in the UK for 20 years, and on odd occasions I would go to international events. And the rule of the way to do that was to find yourself in your qualifying race, in your qualifying heat, and then during the practice sessions you would go out and you would crash into everyone, and you would let everyone else in your race know that you were the baddest bastard in the whole of the event. So when you came to do the real qualifying, you started to use that reputation to get those cars to move out of your way or to avoid you. And that's one of the skills of racing. I mean, a lot of what you've just discussed are the lessons of racing, and that it applies to racing anything. Keep your nose clean, take your time, pick your moments, and you'll find a way, as long as you're not trying to drive at 110%.
Yeah, I was going to mention that digital racing kind of, I won't say forces, but it definitely encourages the looking ahead of, you know, corners and picking your lane. Because, you know, if the guy's half a lap away from me, I can't be looking at my car to figure out which lane he's in. I've got to just kind of drive conservatively enough that I can get a good bead on where his car is to pick the right lane and hope he doesn't change lanes and stuff like that. But people are crashing all over the place. So, you know, with if you're out of the slot, you're out of the slot rule. I will slow down and, you know, stop for a crash in front of me than, you know, try to plow through it because it's definitely detrimental to me if I come out by trying to plow through a crash. So you pretty much always got to be looking ahead. Not to mention, most of the time you're having to look at a screen to gauge your fuel levels and tire wear and stuff like that if you're into the simulations like I am. So that happens when you're on the straightaway. You know, glance up, glance back down. But yeah, and of course those skills apply to, you know, analog racing as well, as Chris was mentioning, knowing whether you're on the outside of something. Does anybody else have any last minute opinions on that? A couple minutes left before I hit the stop button, but we will keep chatting. Yep. Nope, we're good. Phil, you just came in. We were talking about even lane lengths and passing and stuff like that. Do you have a quick 2-minute? What do you guys do when you're digital racing and you're in a dead heat and you're trying to make a pass? Do you guys take each other out? Do you guys have special pass locations, stuff like that?
Well, you know, for me, as a matter of fact, I just had this going on Friday. Had a couple of family members in the house, and we were racing, you know, and I always look at it the same way you do, you know, one-to-one track riding or racing. You, if you're catching up with someone, you're already faster than them. So if you don't make gross mistakes in digital racing, what's nice is if you know you were catching someone and you're running a dead heat, you're going to come to that lane changer. And now there's time to make a decision. Do I try to make one of those real quick lane changes real close? Or do I just let them go, you know, a track length or so ahead? What I'll do is just back off just enough to get some space. And I'll use the approach to the lane changer to do that. Because I know if I go through a lane changer too fast, you know, the car might get a little sideways. So I just, as I approach a lane changer, just ease up a little bit, hit the button, change the lane. Now I've got clear track. Now I can motor, you know, I've moved from behind them to the other lane, you know. And if I think someone's kind of dodgy and they're right next to me, they're working real hard and they want to get over, I might even let them get by and get over, because I know if they're driving that hard, just like racing, they're going to make a mistake because they're trying too hard. They're racing you, not the track anymore. Because you win when you race the track. You crash when you race the other guy. That's just my opinion. But
no, that's
it's always happened that if I crashed, you know, I was crashing because I was trying to outdo the other person in a moment, and I lost focus of where I'm at on the track, what my vehicle's doing at the time, you know, and I've lost my finesse. So usually I pay.
That's a perfect way to say it, and a perfect way to end our 2-hour recording. As always, if you are watching these at a later date and you can attend a live meeting, you absolutely should. Just search for Worldwide Slot Car Chat and you'll find a link to the next one. Wayne next week is going to be at our later time, but in 2 weeks' time, we'll be at this time. So hopefully your brother and you can make one of those two Zoom chats. But for everybody else, come to a meeting and we'll keep chatting after I hit the stop button. And now is the time to wave bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much.